'Twas brillig in the silty toves, did gyre gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the burrow groves, and mome the rats outgabe. Beware the jabberwock, my son, the claws that bite, the jaws that snatch. Beware the jubjub bird, and shun the fumulous bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword with hand. Long time the maxinome foe he sought. He rested he by the tumtum tree, and stood a while in thought. The jabberwock, with eyes of flame, came whiffling through the tungy woods and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through his vorpal blade went snicker snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the jabberwock? Come to my arms, my bleemish boy. Oh, happy day, Kaluth Kalay, he chortled in his joy. 'Twas billig and the silty toves, did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the burrow groves, and mome the rats outgabe.
Wow, that wasn't practice. I didn't know it was coming. Thank you, Nolan.
That's my mic check.
You know, it is often said that more accomplished a person is, the less introductions, they need. And Nolan is, you're definitely one of those people because, because you have, your creations over the years and your vision touched lives, in some cases transformed lives, directly, indirectly. And I'm curious, in the audience, I can't quite make the, median age here, but who among you played your very first computer game on an Atari? Wow, look at that.
Some of the younger people don't know what Atari is.
What about, how many of you remember Chuck E. Cheese as a happy place from your childhood? In our case, it's parenthood, because we...
Not so happy for parents.
Nolan created a bunch of companies, but those two companies were companies that created those markets. I think when you started Atari in 1971, there was no Wall Street analyst analyzing computer games. The market size was zero. And I think next year, that number is supposed to be globally $400 billion, from zero to $400 billion. And for Chuck E. Cheese, which pioneered what is the term, family entertainment and dining industry, that did not exist. And now that industry is $10 billion. I mean, those are the things that you most likely know. But there are a couple things I don't think many people know, which they should. Sequoia Capital's founder, Dan Valentine, made investment in Atari. And that was a very important investment because before him, as far as I know, there was only Arthur Rock. There was no other VC in the Valley, or for that matter, nowhere else. And he only invested in technology risk. But in Atari's case, there was the product, but it just needed to change. There was a go-to-market strategy and scalability issue. So it was a business risk. So Dan Valentine designed this type of investment in tranches. And that was the very first time that it was ever done. And those tranche-based investment became seed funding and Series A funding. So what I want you to remember is, like, you were the first one that ever happened. And second thing is, which you proved us right now with your mind check, you were the original cool founder of Silicon Valley. I don't think there was this cool company culture existed before you. And Steve Jobs, who you hired, took some of those cool company aspects and work hard, play hard, take it to Apple, and then over the years, it transformed into becoming the norm of Silicon Valley culture. So that's the second thing you might not know. And the third thing, which was surprising to me too, as I was preparing for this, Nolan in 1981 started the very first technology incubator ever. And that technology incubator, I'm going to ask you some questions about it because it worked, it created and tried to create some amazing things, and I didn't know. 1985, before GPS, a car navigation system that actually worked. And you also worked on robots that could become, home companions. This was the most impressive one. In 1984, you did the very first online shopping before internet with laser discs and modems, and I think there's I don't know the name of the shoe company, but the shoe company, in fact...
It was by video.
Yeah. You could buy shoes, and it would come to your home in 1984. So those were some great ideas, some great creations, and I would really love to know, like, what is in your family upbringing, your early career education that, planted that seed of innovation and creativity for you, because as business leaders and even parents here, we can foster creativity.
Well, I think that for me, I always read a lot of science fiction. And science fiction generally talks about a world that could be. And I think that entrepreneurship is a lot about envisioning a world that could be and trying to make it happen. So in some ways, entrepreneurship is about making the future happen faster.
Yeah.
If you want to live in the future, create it. And I think that, to me, what is fun is the problem of entrepreneurship. It's a puzzle. And it's about predicting the future. If you can properly predict the future, you can take the risk out of things. Lack of the ability to take out risk is a problem. But I'm not great at it. I turned down a third of Apple Computer for $50,000.
Yeah. I mean, there are some angel investors.
I've regretted that.
So $50,000 for 1/3 of Apple.
Yeah. Steve Jobs came to me as the first investor, and they just needed $50,000.
And you had the money.
So I had the money and all that, but I didn't think Jobs was a decent CEO.
Oh.
I thought, I almost fired him as an engineer, so, as a technician. But that's another story for another time.
But I read in your book that, like, he showed up to the office one day, uninvited. In fact, the people at the reception were kind of scared because he was, like, not in his best dress.
Disheveled.
And Ellen hired him, and then he walked into your office the very first day after he got hired. What did he ask?
He says, "You've got a great company, Nolan, but your people don't know how to solder."
And the first day.
The first day. And he had a couple of PC boards, and he said, "That's a bad solder joint, that's a bad solder joint. It may work right now, but it'll fail within 3 months." And he pointed them out, and he was absolutely right, because I actually knew how to solder pretty well.
But he wasn't an engineer, so...
He was a technician.
Yeah.
And I said, "Can you teach everybody?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "Do that." I walked out, and he says, "Thanks." But one of the things I'm proud of is I really focused Atari on merit, on outcomes. You get rid of an awful lot of bullshit if you just focus on outcomes. And so if you say, "I don't care how you come to work, what you wear. I don't care if you come to work. I don't care when you come to work. If you get the job done, I'm happy." And I think that that ethos in which you get rid of process in favor of outcomes is maybe the biggest key to what made Silicon Valley as successful as it was. Mm-hmm. Because that focus on outcomes was taken to Apple. And at one time, probably between Apple and Atari, we had about a third of the employees of Silicon Valley. And so people looked at us and they said, you know, they don't look like a normal company. And it got replicated and fixed. And, you know, when I first moved to Silicon Valley, if you were an engineer, you wore a white shirt and tie to work every day because you were a professional.
I mean, what I don't understand is, I mean, this is the 1969, the summer of love, Woodstock. People had, I'm sure in their closets, everybody had a hippie outfit.
Oh yeah, hippie outfit. You'd go up to the, you know, pretend you were a hippie.
But how come you ended up being the first one to do this, not somebody else? Was it like strategic or organically happen?
I knew we were different, and kind of the other trailblazing thing is I was the youngest CEO in Silicon Valley by like a lot. Everybody else was in their middle 40s, early 50s. And I always felt like I didn't belong in some ways, like I was a poser, which I was. But it was it was an interesting time. When we talk about venture capital and things like that, I'm kind of different. I think it's a great, wonderful thing if you don't get venture capital and you can still be successful. Mm-hmm. I mean, Atari started with $500 in the bank account, and we grew the company to $3 million before we ever got a penny of venture capital. And you know, what that does is it makes your company really, really scrappy. And how did we do it? We built games, and we turned our inventory very quickly. So the parts that come in, we'd turn them into games, we'd sell them for cash, and it didn't have to pay for the parts for 60 to 90 days. Mm-hmm. And that meant positive cash flow. And so, like, I like the idea of companies that, as they grow, they throw off cash. Like, I got a startup that I'm working on right now that, if it works the way I think it will, it'll cost me $200,000 to spin a location up. Think of it as Chuck E. Cheese for education, kind of. And it's called an education supercharger. And I think I can spin one up for less than $200,000, and it'll throw off $1 million of EBITDA the first year. Now, if you've got that, you've got $1 billion business. It just takes a little bit of business.
But the scalability was, I think, when Dan Valentine came as the VC, you know, that bridge between formulating the product market fit, understanding that there is something there, and then scaling up. I mean, venture capital's place, how do you think about that? Is that still valid?
Well, you know, when Don came to us, he says, "Can I see your business plan?" We didn't have one. We never had one. We're just building games and selling them. And so he says, "Well, in order to invest, I need a business plan." And I said, "Do you know somebody that can write one for me?" I was so young and dumb. Now I'm old and dumb, so I think it's not as good.
With Atari and Chuck E. Cheese, the timing was right. You know, you stumbled upon something, you built it. There was product market fit, not immediately, but you made it happen. And then there were times like the first internet where there was not enough platform to support that, or the car navigation system that you built in 1985 that worked, it didn't really, it wasn't the right timing. How founders can, especially founders that are creative and this kind of visionary, how can they have the discipline to say to themselves, maybe the timing is not right?
I have a lot of ideas for business. There are a couple of guys that I know that we sit down and have a couple of beers and spin up 3 companies in an evening in concept. What I do is I write a micro business plan, and I try to put down everything that I can guess about. And here, hey, ChatGPT is a godsend. Because when you're researching something now, I can get good data that used to take me days. I can get them in minutes now. And wow, what a wonderful tool that is. And so I do a micro business plan, and I try to guess at what my customer acquisition cost, what the cost of a lifetime value of a customer is, all that stuff. And then I put it on the shelf. I call it my marinade pile. And if you have one idea, there's only one time, it's now. If you have a multiple of ideas, then timing works to your favor, because all of a sudden you'll be at a cocktail party and you'll meet somebody that you say, that's the perfect CEO to that company. And then you spin it up, dust it off, get that person to come in and be a partner, boom, and you've curated a company. Mm-hmm. And it's much more successful if the market is right. For example, COVID fundamentally changed. It was a singularity in a lot of ways. Like one of my companies right now, we have our chief marketing officer is in Stockholm, Sweden. Our chief technical officer is in Istanbul, Turkey. Good friend of yours, your brother, no.
Yeah, there's only about 82 million of us, yeah.
But anyway, most of our development team is in Pakistan. You know, that never happened before. I mean, kind of did, but it, you know, COVID just put that into high gear. So it's a different world, and I get this feeling that the world is accelerating. You know, I just think that going from concept to size is getting to be vanishingly small.
But the creative people are by design optimistic. It's kind of like a double-edged sword. And I know it firsthand, like, you know, the best businesses that I've built were the ones where my wife, who's in the audience, told me no, and I listened because my mind didn't really wander off and go anywhere. So, because as creative people, your default is to believe that it's going to happen. What is your advice to those founders that are like cursed with the blessing of creativity and they believe it can happen? At what point they should get the sign that it's not going to happen? Not because of they can't do it, maybe because the market is not ready or the technology that they're building on something is not ready.
Have you ever heard somebody say, oh, he or she stole my idea? You know, ideas are shit. Execution is everything. And if somebody says they stole my idea, what they're really saying is I was too lazy to do something about it. Having the idea gives you zero ownership on that idea. When you start working on it, you own it a little bit. When you work on it a lot, you own it more. And that's really the important thing that you have to do, is execution, execution, execution. And, you know, I think that people get carried away with ideas, and I used to always say, any idiot that's had a shower has had a good idea. It's the guy that drives off and goes off and accomplishes something.
You know, speaking about ideas and creativity, I read you, Steve Wozniak, Richard Branson, all of you, all three, talking about how creativity sometimes requires certain degree of rule breaking. That's how innovation happens. So how much rule breaking for founders are okay, especially when we're in this time of AI and there are a lot more gray areas? Is there anything?
Well, you have to be an anarchist, because if you were a slave to what is, you're never going to be able to accomplish what can be. And you have to be optimistic, and you have to be able to see a world that can be. I mean, the biggest difference between my wife and I is my wife lives in today, and I live in tomorrow. And it drives her crazy, and it drives me crazy. But, you know, she keeps the wheels running, and I'm off chasing fantasies and fairies.
Speaks to my heart. I mean, I can see my wife laughing right there. You know, those incredible ideas, things that are so hard to accomplish. Okay, I can understand how you make yourself believe it because you live in tomorrow, but the people around you that are crucial to make those happen, how do you convince them that this is possible?
That's where you need a reality distortion field.
What's that?
That is where you have such an elegant gift of gab that you can convince people to walk through fire and walk on coals to accomplish this goal. You have to become an evangelist, a teacher, a messiah, but you really have to be able to instill a vision in someone else. Or you just have to pay them a lot.
Yeah. I mean, is that what you did with, I think when you were working on this home companion robot, which it amazes me, this is 1983, we still don't have that. You know, after that 41 years, I think what you did, if that's true, what you're referring to, you were at the CES and you, on the stage, figured out a way for that robot to bring you beer, and that's how you made people that's possible?
Yes, and you know, the technology was so bad. We didn't have multi-threaded, multitasking software at the time. The sensors were bad. I don't know. You know, I think that entrepreneurs should look at technology and right-size it for what is there. Because if your company is dependent on you violating the laws of physics, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, if you want the world, if you want the technology to do things that it's just not ready yet, it's the wrong time.
Yeah.
I had a restaurant chain called U-Wink, and we had at the table ordering and game playing. I kind of wanted it to be like a Chuck E. Cheese for young adults, and instead of the arcade, going off to the arcade, that you could stay at the table. that the technology at the time was it cost us about $10,000 a table to touch screens and things like that. If I'd have waited 2 years, I would have been able to use an iPad to do the same things for about $200.
I mean, any lessons there from that perspective for the AI founders of today, where it's so foggy, you don't know what can support you, what might be tomorrow coming in, or the big guys, what are they going to do? I mean, is there any advice to current AI founders from that respect?
Well, I think that we are going to go through more societal change in the next 5 years than we have in the last 100. And I think it's going to be a tremendous opportunity and a curse at the same time. And it's going to depend on whether you embrace it and ride the singularity. But stop to think about self-driving cars. All of a sudden, 2 million drivers don't have a job. All of a sudden, 500,000 insurance adjusters and body shop repair out of a job. You know, that's just one. AI is going to put a tremendous number of customer service representatives out of business. Supposedly, it's going to put a third of attorneys out of business. You know, just accounting. You will be able to use AI to completely eliminate 70% of your accounting staff. You know, just that's big stuff. And so you say, what if you're in business? If you're in business school right now, how do you guard against it? You know, and I'm not sure, but I think if you're a resilient, creative thinker, you'll survive really well. If you're a recipe player, in which you follow a recipe, that job's going away because the AI will be able to follow that recipe much more equivalently and efficiently than you do. So beware of process.
If there was a chance now that you could go back to the time, 1969, I think, when you went to Silicon Valley, right? And give one advice to that young Nolan about what he could do and what he shouldn't do, what would that advice be?
Number one, when you get bored, sell it. Don't think you can fix it by handing it off to somebody else. Mm. You either own something and you work it, or get rid of it, put the cash in the bank. I had a chance to sell companies, and every time I sold the company, I could have sold it for more if I'd have waited later, but it was the right time. And I think that for me, holding on to companies too long has been a recurring problem.
Thank you for sharing your journey with us, like all the changes you brought in and, ideas and the creations you brought to our lives. So as we wrap up, I'd like to ask the audience to help me say thank you, Nolan, for his creations and his time with us today.
Thank you very much. Oh, come on, sit down. look for things that are broken. There's a lot of things in the world right now that are broken, and education's one of them. In some ways, truth is broken. You can't have individual truth. You know, it's either real or it's not. And so, as we go forward, be optimistic. The future is going to be better than the past if we choose to make it that way. And memorize a new poem tonight. Thank you.